We always keep saying, well, what does it take to fix this country? It's right there in front of us in the oldest document of this country's history.
What do people in Washington rarely discuss that is a major issue along the border?
It hurts families to actually have open borders because families were separating themselves to come here.
You recently received the endorsement from President Trump. You announced you're running for Congress. What convinced you now was the right time to do that?
I want to protect freedom and I want to protect the American way of life. I want to fight for the Constitution. And in the end, it was the patriotism that brought me back into the arena. Americans want somebody who's going to go up there and fight valiantly for them.
Mark, we obviously disagree heavy with the left, a lot about what they're doing. But is there anything they are doing that you sort of agree with?
I agree with all the bad stuff they're doing because they're screwing themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Like they're undermining their own party. I just don't think that, I've said oftentimes, here's the problem, partly with the Republican Party and one of the negatives of the Democrat Party is Democrats are politics. Look at their votes, lockstep, doesn't matter. We have 50 different states, yet Congress, everybody in Congress is voting exactly the same because they're politics over principle. Republicans tend to be principally driven. That can cause problems in the Republican Party because then it fractures a little bit. And that's been our challenge. Their challenge is, look, if they decide that the devil is the best person, they're going to vote for it. And it hurts them. And the Republicans decide, well, we all have these different varying principles, levels of it, and that hurts us. But I don't think there's anything that I agree with right now. I think, they're saying you can change your gender. I don't agree with that. They're saying, I think that if they could tax you more, they would. They want to increase the dependability upon government. They want to increase the size of government, the role that government plays in your life. I just don't agree with any of those. I'm very pro-life. I'm pro-freedom. I'm pro-family. I'm pro-God. I'm pro all those things. And I just don't find there's so many of those things that they're just way off course. I would love to find common ground. I would love to find common ground in the fact that we're Americans.
Yep.
And we have a vested interest to work together to find the best way of life. And I think that the best way of life was laid out very wisely and I think godly in the Constitution. And I would love to see the left and the right come back to the Constitution. I think that's our best chance.
Do you think that's even possible? Or do we just have to keep winning Republican seats to hold a majority in the House and Senate?
Look, anything's possible. Anything's possible. However, we're in a place where division is very deep. Mm-hmm. There's a Lincoln's Lyceum address of 1827 where Lincoln gives a speech to the Lyceum Boys Club in Illinois and in Springfield, Illinois. And in there he talks about the division that existed in the country at that time. And we're talking, 150 plus years ago, 170 years ago. And he's talking about the division that existed. And he says, look, do I think the republic will fail? No. Do I think it will dissolve? No. But it cannot continue divided. Either it will go all the way one way or all the way the other way. And I'm afraid that what it's going to take to wake people up will be a shock to the system that really hurts us as a country. And I don't want it to come to that. But I think we're getting further apart. I don't think we're getting closer together. I think we're getting further apart.
No, I agree. And something I seldom remind people, we're still the youngest country in the world. This is an experiment. I don't think the founders really thought we would be here today. Maybe they did, but that's why we have the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and we award states individual rights through their individual constitutions. When we look at Arizona, we're going through a little bit of a transition right now. We have a Democrat running the governor's mansion. We have a lot of people competing on the left with Republicans right now in races across the entire state. A lot of Republicans are deciding they want to run for governor. David Schweikert giving his seat up. Maybe not the best idea. When I look at you, Mark, you've had quite the career. You recently received the endorsement from President Trump. You announced you're running for Congress. What convinced you now was the right time to do that?
Patriotism. Well, patriotism. Look, I listed it out, pros and cons. I'm very, methodical, and I'm passionate, but I list out what are the pros, what are the cons for a certain decision, and I listed out the cons, and I couldn't find very many pros for running for office. Financially, it's an impact. People hear 174,000. When you divide that two ways, it's not very big. I'm not interested in going and doing any insider trading, or I don't feel like you should leave office wealthier than what you came in. That's not. Does it parlay you into things in the future? Yeah. But in the end, none of it really made a ton of sense, other than the fact that I am a true red-blooded American patriot. And I love God, family, freedom. And I think that my place here on earth is to do everything I can to defend that for not just my family, myself, but for other people as well. It's why I was in the profession I was in for 2 decades. I want to protect freedom, and I want to protect the American way of life. I want to fight for the Constitution. And in the end, it was the patriotism that brought me back into the arena. Because nothing else really made sense. And I'm not a politician. I've said it many times. I am a patriot who loves God, family, freedom, and the Constitution, and I'm willing to do what is necessary to protect those things. And there's not a lot of us out there. And I think the American people are hungry for authentic Americans who truly want to serve for the right reasons, who are committed to defending American values and principles, even if it's not popular or even if you're standing alone. And I think I've done that over the years as a sheriff. I've shown through very difficult times like COVID that I'm not afraid to stand on my own.
God, family, freedom, you see that on every Republican conservative palm card across the country. Those are hot topics. They're good SEO search words. What does it actually mean, though?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we see it on everybody's card. I wish we did. I think we see, faith, family, freedom. It means something to me. I think you have to have core values in your life to be successful. What are your pillars? And I've always said, for me, it's God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. Look, first of all, God. I'm unapologetic about my belief in God and Jesus Christ. I think they played not just an integral role. I think it is, our founding fathers said this nation was made for a moral people, and anything else is not going to work. And I think that God played an integral role in helping these founding fathers come together, meeting of the minds. They were of different religious backgrounds. They were very different type of men. Some were more religious than others. Some were not religious. But in the end, I think it was divine intervention, divine providence that actually brought them together to develop the Constitution and give us the country we have, which protects the God-given freedoms we've been given. I think you have to understand that what we have as Americans are godly things, not given to us by politicians. They're given to us by God, protected by men who understood the importance of those things. So understanding the role God plays in your life and in your country, I think, is important. And I think we need to interject that back into Washington, D.C. I hear constantly from people that live in Washington, D.C., they say, man, I was working in that office and I didn't, for years, never once heard the talk of God or what is good or what is right or wholesome. I don't hear that. And so I think that we need that back in Washington, D.C. Family. This country was built on the strength of the family unit. And what we're seeing, especially from issues on the left, we're seeing the destruction of the family. We're seeing this whole push to say, divorce is at its all-time high. With fatherless homes, single parent homes, the family unit has been destroyed. If you go and look at Saul Alinsky and a lot of the communist the tactics, it is to destroy the family and pull people away from God is how they're successful. So I think having a strong family unit will help bring America back as well. I loved, I was at Charlie Kirk's memorial, and I loved the fact that Charlie Kirk encouraged young men and women to get married, to create families, to have offspring. That's how you continue with America. If you don't, we're already under the birth rate. I think our birth rate is at 1.8 or I think it's 1.8.
Lowest it's ever been.
Lowest it's ever been, and sustainable is 1.9. We're already below sustainability. And look no further than England, France, Germany, And those countries in Europe who have let their birth rate fall as low as 1.3, and now they're being taken over by people, many of them from the Nation of Islam, coming in there and changing those countries. Those countries will never be the same. And I don't know that they have the tools to get it back. And I hate to see America fall into that. We are Americans. We come from all different walks of life, from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different countries. But in the end, what has baked us is Americans. And the only way we keep that going is by American families continuing to have children. That's what we need. And then, we take the freedom. I think freedom is one of the most important things ever. I think it's one of the most godly principles. I think we were sent here to this earth to see how we would use freedom and how we would use free choice. And I think it's worth fighting for. Our founding fathers thought it was worth fighting for. So much so that they went against the most powerful nation in the world at the time. They fought and said, we want freedom, and we're willing to stand up and fight for it. And I think it takes that kind of resolve, people who love freedom that much. You can't continue to give it away. We saw during COVID, Benjamin Franklin said those who would give up essential liberties for temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need men and women that understand the depth of freedom and what it takes to protect it, and that it's not always comfortable. It can get very prickly. And then, of course, the Constitution. We always keep saying, well, what does it take to fix this country? It's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there in front of us in the oldest document of this country's history. And that is what we need to get back to. And so those are my core values. So I could go on and on about each one of them more and more, but I think ultimately those are the four things that drive me in what I do and the decisions I make and the life I choose to live.
So with that in mind, Mark, why Congress? Why not spin up a think tank or an advocacy organization and really kind of push those values across all the United States? Take Charlie Kirk, for example. That was his mission. He was big on that. That's where he saw his role was best at the time he was with us. Why Congress? What convinced you to take that role? And in that same vein, how is it different from what you did as sheriff of Pinal County?
25 years ago, if you'd have said, you're going to be the sheriff, I'd have been like, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. It was in 2011. I would have never have thought that this would be the path that I would be on. And I wasn't even a cop till I was 33 years old. And life has a way of changing along the way. And I wouldn't have put Congress, like we talked about before we went live. That wasn't on my bingo card.
Yep.
Like that was not something that was on my list of things that I wanted to accomplish or do. As a matter of fact, I told somebody, they had called me and asked me to run against one of our current congressmen back when I was running for Senate. Mm-hmm. And I just said, look, first of all, I'm unlike you folks in Washington, D.C., I'm loyal. And that man is my friend. Yeah. And so I will never run against him. Number two, I don't want to be a member of Congress. And number three, I thought that if I wasn't in the race, that the chances of, us losing that Senate race were high. And so I stayed in there, and, it was honor that drove me then to a position that I felt, there's a good old Danish saying, I think it encapsulates it. It says that he who has the ability has the responsibility. I think you have to look and say, it may not be what we want to do, but it's what God has intended for us or what we're capable and what we have the ability to do. I found myself running for sheriff because I thought that we needed better leadership in law enforcement. And I didn't like the direction that Obama had us going as a country, where we were undermining the rule of law and turning the communities against our police. And I didn't want to be the guy that just complained about it. So I decided to run for sheriff. That was in 2011. I didn't run till 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. And I made a lot of changes in life things, and I went through some tough times to get to that point. And then I thought I'd be the sheriff for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And
You're America's sheriff. A lot of people coin you that.
I thought I would be that for a long time. I loved it. I loved the profession. And then, not to get into too much of it, I don't mind if we do, but I lost my kids. I lost my son and my granddaughter and my daughter-in-law. And what it really did was it awoke in us the fact that there is no guarantee for tomorrow. Yeah. And the only thing we take with us in this life is what we do. And so we made a decision that we were going to take our experience and our abilities, and we were going to try to change the country. My wife, when we talked about running for Congress, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but
you're fine.
when we talked about running for Congress, I have said for years, but before I was even sheriff, I will always go where my voice is loudest for God, family, and freedom. And for a long time, it was sheriff. And I thought we did a good job and our voice was loud. And then I thought we needed to run for Senate and talk about the border and talk about fentanyl and talk about the issues that were impacting Americans and how dangerous they were and just how I thought it was, going to be a real detriment to the country and amongst other things. And now I found myself where my wife, when we finally I went through the anger and grief phases of accepting of running for Congress, my wife looked at me and she said, "You have always said you will go where your voice is loudest for God, family, freedom." Right now, my family and I feel like Congress is where my voice can be the loudest for God, family, and freedom. Charlie Kirk was really good at his voice being loudest on school campuses, amongst the youth, going all over the country, and in some places going across to other countries to do it. For other people, it might be supporting in the background. But for me, I think that, we feel very compelled in the sense that right now, I think that my voice that I bring is loudest for those things that I love in Washington, D.C. and the role of Congress.
Well, and I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the border. You are an expert on the border. You've spent a lot of times along the border addressing issues. What do people in Washington rarely discuss that is a major issue along the border?
Well, it's changed a little bit, obviously. I mean, when President Trump won the election, we started to see the change immediately. Let me just say for anybody out there because we did the AZ talks down at ASU's Thunderbird campus. Yeah. And I was in there, and I was probably one of the few conservatives in the room talking about the border issues. Mm-hmm. This was still when Joe Biden was president, and the border was just a disaster. And I was talking to people about just real numbers about what it really looked like and what kind of military-age men were coming here from all over the world, not just from South America or Mexico or Guatemala. They were coming from everywhere. And remember, these folks don't have allegiance to our country. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking about that. I thought that's a dangerous thing. Look at New York. New York City just elected Mondami as their mayor. He's a self-avowed Democratic socialist, which basically is a communist. They can call it socialism all they want.
Makes them feel better, but
Ayn
it's a
Rand,
communist.
who wrote Atlas Shrugged, she was from Russia, said they're essentially the same thing. Mm-hmm. I've always said that socialism is communism without the violence. And I think that this is the cute way of saying you're a communist, but they really just say they're socialists. So he's a self-avowed democratic socialist, he calls himself. So, but if you look at who voted for him, the people who were actually born in New York or born in this country were not voting for him. It was the people who had been here for less than 10 years and in many cases less than 5 years that were given the ability to vote in our elections, who have no allegiance to the principles and the values that this country was built on. Capitalism or building your own life, being the master of your own future. And instead, they want the government to be the master of their future. I'm not okay with that. But that's what we saw. That's socialism. That's what they want. They think it sounds really good on paper, and it sounds everybody loves each other and everybody gets health care. And no, Margaret Thatcher said socialism works until you run out of other people's money. Yeah. And so we're in a dangerous place because we've imported, and I was saying this for a long time, and people get uncomfortable with it. But I said they are changing the demographic of America. Not only were they changing the voting structure, they were adding bodies to congressional districts so they weren't losing seats in places like California. They were doing it for the votes. They were doing it for the funding. They were doing it. The NGOs were being financially incentivized to continue with human trafficking and in many cases drug trafficking. There was a lot at play at that. But one of the things they were doing was changing the demographic of America. And New York's a perfect example of it. We're seeing in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Dearborn, Michigan. You're seeing the uprising in Texas. Phoenix, 27 mosques in Phoenix, one of the most amount for a large community. There are things that are changing in America, and with our birth rate being below that 1.9%, it's only a matter of time before other communities end up like New York. And people who come from other countries with different mindset start to inject that into our country and what this country was built on. And it's incompatible with the Constitution and the principles of God and the belief in a divine creator, and in most cases, Jesus Christ, that it changes this country. And so that, I think a lot of politicians may or may not understand it, but they don't want to talk about it.
Would you
They're
call
afraid
that?
to talk about
Would
it.
you call that a cultural transformation? Then is that what an open border and a border that's not secure is causing, this cultural transformation in the United States?
Yeah, because the cultures, the clashing are the culture of America.
Yeah.
People who have an allegiance to America versus people who have an allegiance to a different country, or possibly a religion over country. Those are dangerous. Those are dangerous combinations. And this country has been great because Americans had pride in America. They believed in the country. They believed in our system of our capitalist system, our political system. They believed in the ability to make something of your life and of yourself. They believed, and many of those people are coming here now where they used to come here and work here and create something, change the future of their family. Now they come and they take from us. 59% of all the people in this country that are here illegally, which they don't even really know, are taking benefits from SNAP or from other federal government benefits. Those are reserved. Those should be reserved for American citizens. And yet a lot of those are going to people that are not from this country. Many people are coming to this country just to get those benefits and no intention to work. And then we are protecting them in many of those cities. So yeah, it's frustrating. And I think a lot of politicians, they're too scared to say what needs to be said. They're afraid of losing elections as opposed to actually standing up for the American people. And I think that's dangerous. The other piece, go back to your question, is the fentanyl piece. Drugs have been a problem for decades, fentanyl being the most lethal of all of them. Now it's expanding into xylazine, nitazine. These are the things that are impervious to Narcan and naloxone. So when somebody has a fentanyl poisoning, if it has xylazine or nitazine on it, it's not going to affect it. It might affect the fentanyl piece to it, but it won't affect the other part. And this is dangerous. No enemy has ever had success killing Americans like the cartels in China and the other purveyors of the fentanyl poison have had. So look, I know I'm going to roll off into it anyway. Before you may or may not even ask this question. There's a hot topic right now of bombing these boats coming from Venezuela, and people are like, we just had politicians, our own Mark Kelly, senator, telling American troops to not follow orders. I can't think of a more reckless thing. If you worked in my agency and you were one of my captains and you went out and publicly told my troops to defy lawful or orders that I was giving as the sheriff, because if you ask them what are the illegal orders they've been given, they don't have any examples. So if you were to do that, I would fire you. I would demote you at minimum. But now we have a senator out there recklessly saying that, and then our other senator saying, hey, remember, when we take power back, we're going to come after those people who were on those military tribunals. These were our elected officials. Not to mention, they were the ones that continue to vote to keep this government closed because they didn't get their way, like a child throwing a temper tantrum. They didn't get their way. And so what do? They continue to vote to keep the government closed. All they had to do was vote yes to pass a continuing resolution. It wasn't even like we fixed the budget or balanced the budget. It was a continuing resolution. So you have these senators now saying you need to defy these orders.
When you say these senators, we're talking about Mark Kelly.
We're talking about Mark Kelly, and then he said that, but then you've got Gallego now doubling down on it.
Of course.
You got a doubling down on it.
They're skating a party line, but let's talk about them by
name. I kind of fired off into a whole
minute.
different section.
No, you're good. I want to come back. I want to circle back to the war on drugs for a minute and get your opinion on that. But Mark Kelly, if you're in the executive branch and you were the one in charge of deciding what to do with a statement like this. You said what you would do if it was one of your troops. If you're in charge of deciding the repercussions for Mark Kelly, what are those?
Well, I think who's in charge of it is being that he's a captain, his rank, I think, is a different status than most soldiers, who leave the military. Yes. So he's held to a different standard. I think he should absolutely go through a military tribunal. I think that he has the stature within the military, having been a captain or whatever rank he ended up at. I think that he absolutely should be run through the tribunal. That's what normal people would go through. They're going to use the Article 1, Section 6 of speech or debate clause. Yes. But I think the speech or debate clause was designed for the floor of Congress, the halls of Congress. This video was done in their offices, in their homes.
Public statement.
It was a public statement. It was very outside of the speech or debate clause. I think if you were the Founding Fathers would have been irate with somebody trying to convince them. Look at Benedict Arnold was somebody who went against the troops, not in the very same way, but in this particular case, this is a guy who should know better, who understands the uniform code of the military and should have adhered to it. And he was reckless, not only as a politician, but as a former service member and as a captain of that military. So I think he should face consequences. I don't know what those consequences should be. I think he should be demoted, if not maybe even stripped of his pension or his service in the military. That should be what you should face when you encourage soldiers to defy the orders of the commander-in-chief, especially when you have no examples of unlawful orders.
Do you think he committed treason?
I read that, but I was reading it, and I just don't know that it meets that. I think that it certainly is starting to walk that line, but I don't know that per the Constitution it meets that criteria. Okay. But I think you're encouraging an insurrection, from within the military, which could be more dangerous than actually from the citizens.
You're encouraging a lot by making a statement like that. I mean, imagine if we have infighting on the people that are supposed to serve and protect.
I just think it's so dangerous and reckless coming from, these politicians. But this is the left. They're unhinged, and there's been no consequences for politicians. Yeah. This is what Americans are frustrated with. The average American is ticked off that the Comeys, the case gets dropped. Letitia James, she can do whatever, and apparently the case gets dropped. The Clintons, she can delete all these emails. Case gets dropped. People lying. We as in law enforcement, if you lie or you're untruthful, you get Brady listed, if not fired. Most of us would lose our certifications from a state level. Yet there's never any consequences for the Washington D elites. Most of us are dubious as to whether there'll be any consequences for this kind of reckless behavior. And then another senator coming out and saying, look, if you are on these tribunals, remember, when we get back into power, we won't forget it.
Oh, what a threat is that?
Only that, language that was unbecoming of senator as well.
Oh, yeah. AOC has been very vocal about, remember, there was a time when Trump was not in office.
Yeah, we remember, and it sucked.
Yeah, exactly. The country was going to shit, actually. But, Mark, going back, war on drugs, fentanyl's coming in. We've got a lot of human sex trafficking activity going on through the border, through all of Arizona right now. A lot of people forget we've got that major highway that connects Phoenix to Vegas. I worked with the Valley Against Sex Trafficking in East Mesa. We funded a lot of sting operations, and in 3 days, there was one point, 34 men tried to have sex with a 14-year-old. This is an isolated situation in Mesa that's going on. It's happening all over the place. We don't hear enough stories about that, I think, in Washington, D.C., of the rate of which women, mostly women, some men as well, are being trafficked across all of the United States. Are there solutions being proposed right now or ideas you have to fix that problem?
Well, you got to secure the border.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the biggest sources of the human trafficking.
Define secure the border for me. What does that mean?
Well, look, there's some things that, like the Remain in Mexico program. That's an excellent program, because what a lot of these people came in under the last 4 years is they came in under a false asylum claim. Now, the reason I say false asylum is because they didn't come from countries where an asylum claim would even exist. They weren't being persecuted religiously or politically, but they were coming here, and the Biden administration was basically just waving a wand and saying, yeah, okay, here's a court date. We saw these court dates extending out to 2030, 2032. That's a long time from now.
Yeah.
So those people get to stay in the country all this time, only to have most of these, the real numbers are about 90 to 95%. I think the real number is over 95% of asylum claims will be overturned. So the Remain in Mexico program solves a lot of that problem.
Okay.
We've got to fix, what Congress can do is fix the immigration side of it. You know, look, we should want good people that'll be good for our country to have a more clear path to becoming a citizen or getting a green card. And then what we should do is eliminate the illegal entries, the line cutters, the people that paid the cartels to come here and who were trafficked by the cartels. That you've got to eliminate. If you don't eliminate that, the cartels will mix in the human trafficking, the women, the children that are being trafficked for sex and hard labor, and the men that are being trafficked in this country for the same things, extorted. That all exists because you were allowing people to come into the country unvetted. And when they tell you, oh no, we were vetting them, BS. If you have 800 to 1,000 people coming in a day, or in this case, we were having 5,000 to 7,000 coming in a day, how in the world are you going to vet all those people? How are you going to vet all those people?
Yeah.
I ran a jail where people were booked into my jail. I wouldn't have been able to process 5,000 people a day and give even a remotely decent vetting process. So they weren't being vetted. I know from Border Patrol guys and all that inside stuff, they weren't being vetted properly. So
are you going to argue for more funding for border security if you get into Congress?
Well, I thought the funding was very robust in the BBB, the big beautiful bill.
Is that enough to fix this though?
I mean, it's a good start. I mean, those things, here's the things people think, oh, we allotted the money for it, it's fixed. No.
Yeah.
No, like a government moves really slow.
Yes.
Like if I say we're going to hire 20,000 Border Patrol agents, you know how long that takes?
How long?
Years. For me to hire, 100 people, I got to put them through a 6-month academy. I have to do a background check on every single one of them. I got to hire 100 people. Think about 20,000 people. And think about the people that will leave. The attrition rate is almost equal to what you're adding them on. So it's not an overnight fix. I love it. I think it's good, but it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take years to be able to fill the ranks, even if you can fill the ranks. If you were aggressive and had a phenomenal hiring marketing program, all of that stuff, just the academy process, the background, you just don't have the facilities to process the amount of people that need to go through it. And so it's going to take time.
Yeah.
The infrastructure needs to be better. We're using antiquated fiber. I know of a company that does a much better fiber program. Try getting that into the government. It's extremely difficult to find somebody to talk to because a lot of times the guys who used to work at Border Patrol now work at companies that have contracts with the government. Do you think they want to let you in to bring in a new product? No.
Yeah.
I mean, we're ages behind. We're years behind on the drone program stuff.
Yeah.
We have 60,000 drone incursions in a month down on the southern border.
Wow.
You don't even hear about that.
No one talks about that.
Nobody talks about that. And yet there are so many federal restrictions that law enforcement, a D-drone machine, a machine that takes a drone out of the sky and brings it down to the ground. I can't even get that as a sheriff. Only the federal government can have it.
Why can't you get it as a sheriff?
Because the federal government made it to where when they pass these laws that only the federal government can have it. And a lot of it has to do with radio frequencies and different things. The FAA, the FCC, all of these different organizations who have their hands in the cookie jar on the federal government level. We have bureaucrated ourselves to death. And it's going to be to our demise because we cannot get out of our own way. And our own politicians have created this quagmire of laws and restrictions, and to undo it. I'm currently working. I work with some companies that are, trying to get bills passed. And so I go up there and I, walk into an office and smile and be an expert on these things. And just to get those things through, you're talking a year, 2 years. By then, we're behind the eight ball.
Somebody knew it as an office at that point.
I mean, we're so far behind on the drones. We're so far. If you haven't, look at what's going on in Ukraine. The use of the drones. Not much scares me. Drones concern me because you can put an army of drones out for literally nothing. It doesn't cost a country a lot of money. I could send 1,000 drones that are flying at 200 miles per hour that are, dropping bombs on people.
Yeah.
Should be scary to Americans. And yet we're a country mile behind on this, man. Like we have got to do better on so many levels. And I think part of the reason I'm running for Congress is not just my patriotism. It's the knowledge and the understanding of these things that you can bring to what is really just a group of, some of them are just flat out goofballs that are gotten elected. But a lot of them are not experienced in the fields that they're passing laws on. And so what does it open it up for? It opens it up for bureaucrats and special interest groups to pass laws that are beneficial to them, but not necessarily beneficial to the people that actually need the laws, like law enforcement. So I'd love to bring that knowledge on the border up there to be able to talk about laws and how we fix the border stuff, how we stop human trafficking, how we stop drug flows, how we stop fentanyl deaths, hopefully. And so many of the things work. Like President Trump has done a great job of putting executive orders in place, but if you get a new president in 3 years, it goes away. And he can do exactly what Joe Biden did 5 years ago and screw it all up.
Yeah.
And so I think you need people there that understand, like, look, let's get this done. Being the sheriff, it's different than being a legislator. But at the same time, I've been in government. I understand some of the inner workings of it. I've been down at the state capitol. I understand somewhat how the sausage is made. Don't love it. It's ugly. The average American would be appalled to know how it all is made.
Absolutely.
But you need people in there that are common sense, but that are also mission-oriented, who are like, look, we're going to get this done.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it is people are sitting here today may or may not like what I'm saying. But one of the things that I am is I'll sit down with anybody and let's talk about how we get to the best solution for the American people. And I think that is what has been lost. What we have are the best solutions so that you get reelected, or the best solution that puts money in your donors' pockets, or the best solution for other countries and not America. And I'm sick and tired of that. And I think Americans are sick and tired of that. Americans want somebody who's going to go up there and fight valiantly for them. And I think that's what we need. And that's what I bring to the table. I've done as a sheriff, and I'll be, fierce as a lion doing it as a congressman.
Let's talk about your critics for a minute. A lot of critics will say...
Well, I have critics?
You've got quite a few. A lot of critics will say strong enforcement policies hurt families. You obviously were very close to the border. You've seen the situation firsthand. What's the strongest version of that argument, actually? Because the left will do a lot of propaganda on we're separating families, we're hurting families. Is that actually the case?
No, that's a talking point. That's a talking point. You know who separates the families? The families did, or the cartels did. We had 130,000 unaccompanied minors coming across the border. How is that an America thing? How are we separating those families? And here's the other argument to that. I hear these Democrats say, oh, you're separating families. We do that every day on the streets of America when we have to arrest people. We don't get to go and go, hey, you broke the law, but I see you got kids here and, we hate to separate your family. So we're going to go ahead and give you a pass on this murder. It's not how it works. The law is the law. These folks knew that it was illegal to come into this country. That's why they paid the cartels money to come and bypass the legal process. They knew it when they came here. You know how I square it up? I square it up because I'm all about bringing other people into this country the lawful and legal way. When you do it illegally, it strengthens the cartels. It hurts families. It hurts families to actually have open borders. You know why? Because families were separating themselves to come here. Children were being used as pawns. Women were being raped. Children are still being raped to this day who were brought in under the last administration, who our government has no idea where they're at. How do they square that up?
They point the finger at us. They say that that's our fault.
But see, they can't. They'll tell you some sob story of, and look, I've been on it. And these folks who say that have never been to the border.
Yeah.
These folks who say that are using it only as a talking point because it resonates with American people. The reality is I've seen it with my own two eyes. And what we were letting in under the argument of not separating families were children who are now being raped and abused every day. We let in women who are being raped and abused. The cartels, they can sell you a pill one time, but they can sell you a woman or a child hundreds of times. The cartels are still making money to this day off of the people they trafficked into this country under the last administration.
So let's talk about bombing people. To comment you made earlier, bombing the cartel. You in favor or against it?
Oh, I'm in favor of it. So let me put it into perspective because a lot of people don't have the right perspective on this issue. Because when you look at the maritime laws and you look at our ability, the president's ability to protect the citizens, okay? If a boat is coming to your country with a bomb on it, hell, Congress couldn't even pass a CR. Do you think you're going to go to Congress and get them to pass a bill in the next hour that says I should bomb that boat before that boat gets here with that bomb on it that's going to kill Americans? But see, Americans have been conditioned to view things in that we don't view drugs as a weapon. And this is where the disconnect is. You have to understand that not only are drugs, the fentanyl, a weapon, it has been the most effective weapon that our enemies have found against us. Far more effective than a gun, far more effective than a bomb. We had a bomb that took down three buildings. Well, two buildings, and the other one was probably taken down by the who knows who, because that came down on its own. But that one, that's a whole nother conversation. But you had, and God rest their souls, about 3,500 people that died on 9/11. And I'm not trying to demean this in any way. We're losing 70 to 100,000 people a year right now from fentanyl poisoning.
That's a big number, Mark.
That is a weapon. That is a weapon that is coming from other countries. And when you have a boat that is coming into this country, I would argue that that weapon is far more dangerous than any bomb or anything else. We don't have time to go to Congress. That commander-in-chief has the authority and should have the responsibility to stop that boat from getting to our shores. These are not willy-nilly decisions. They have very good intel on the ground that know that those boats came and that they have drugs on them and that they're occupied by drug dealers or drug mules. So I'm okay with bombing them because you know what it saves? American lives. And this whole garbage of due process. How far are we going to start to extend due process? Does some poor guy in the bottom of Argentina now get due process because the left has decided everybody in the world gets due process?
Yeah.
No, that's an American right. That is what you get when you are an American citizen and you live in this great country. Those people, if they get to our shores, then yeah, we'll talk about due process. Before that, they're coming with a bomb. They're coming with a weapon that will hurt Americans. And I think when people, Americans, hopefully you're listening, start to understand that perspective of it and how dangerous what they're bringing in those boats is and how it is proven time and time again, year after year, that it kills more Americans than any bomb or any enemy or any war has had success killing, I think you have to stop those boats. And thank goodness for a commander-in-chief who has the stones to do it. I applaud President Trump for being the guy that is willing to do it. And I think he's within his right as the commander-in-chief, as the president, to protect American lives, especially when Congress and Senate has proven to be so feckless. It's their own doing that has neutralized what should be the most powerful branch into the weakest branch of government. And it's allowing for, if they don't like it, start being effective. And that way you will take some of the power back from the executive branch or the judicial branch. But until then, you've opened it wide open for the other two branches to far exceed into what should be the legislative branch's authority. And this is why the Constitution matters.
Should illegals have any protections in the United States?
Look, I think due process is an American issue. You know, people are going to argue with that and think, I think if you give it to everybody, then what's the specialness of being an American? What's the value? And we have to be realists. You broke the law when you came into this country, okay? You know when they should have due process? When they break a law. I'm sick and tired of, I just watched as some guy who was a traitor to this country, selling secrets to a foreign government, selling secrets to Israel, who was sent back and was given a hero's welcome. I have a problem with that. Like, why was he not serving time here in this country? If you kill somebody in this country, you commit a crime, I think you should do your time. And when you're done, then we'll send you back to your country. That's when due process applies.
So we have to pay for them to be in our prisons, though? Why not just send them back immediately?
I think you owe it to the victims to not give them a free pass.
Okay.
Because if you send them back, they're not going to go to their prison. Maybe the only country that's proven that they'll do that is El Salvador. All the other countries are likely going to welcome them or just take them back. And guess what? They'll come right back here. That's why we have illegals in this country that have committed crime after crime after crime. And they get sent back and they come back and they change their name or whatever. And maybe they don't even change their name. And they have all these charges that have stacked up and they've hurt American families along the way. You know, what point do we have to have? We have to have justice for the American families as well. So while I think if you came in this country illegally, you should be sent back. But if you hurt an American citizen, you should pay the price for it. In that case, due process should weigh heavy on you.
But where do we draw the line? People coming here to the United States,
you draw the line at the border.
They're given everything.
Yeah.
But they make it in. They get picked up, they get a DUI, they rob somebody, they rape somebody. What do we give that person? Do they get an American treatment or do they get a terrorist treatment?
They should get the terrorist treatment.
And what is the terrorist treatment?
I don't know. Look, that's for Congress to decide, you know? But I think it should be heavy. I think the price should be heavy. Oh, look, I've watched as years. I'm all about justice. Like I had a son who made mistakes, and we went through it as a family. And contrary to what people will say on media, I did not intervene in any way, shape, or form, and the full weight of the law hit him, and it would have anybody else. Yeah. That's part of being honorable and part of accepting consequences to your actions. But we now have judges who release people because of their upbringing or whatever have you, or they're here illegally, or the story. And we're totally undermining the rule of law, and we're affecting American families while we're doing it. And I think until you start to have some more severe consequences for actions, I just don't think you change behavior. Politicians, they behave the way they do because they get away with it. Bureaucrats, they behave the way they do because they get away with it. For 4 years, bureaucrats and politicians in Washington, D.C. funded NGOs. And those NGOs aided and abetted in the trafficking of human beings into this country. And in many cases, drugs came with it. What are the consequences for them? What are the consequences for that child who's now being raped as we speak, who was brought into this country and under the most likely used taxpayer dollars through an NGO that our government was funding? There's no consequences. So why will they stop doing it? Until you make the consequences such that will curb behavior, we're going to have problems.
Mark, what is one truth about the country that you've seen with your own eyes that most people still struggle to accept?
That it's the greatest country in the world.
Why do you think they struggle to accept that?
Because they've been coddled by the greatest country in the world. They've been misled to think. Most Americans never step foot out of this country. Many don't even leave their cities they were raised in. Many don't leave the states they were raised in. Only a handful of Americans are blessed enough to be able to travel the world and see that this is the greatest country in the world. This is why 15 million people, 11 million according to our government, I think the number is much higher, came to this country because they want that freedom. They want what America offers. They did it illegally and they should pay the price for it. But they wanted the American way of life. And yet Americans here do nothing but complain. Like half the American people, if you gave them the option to go to socialism tomorrow, they would do it.
Are they bored? Do you think they're bored or they just have a complete
They're
misconception?
naive. They're naive. They're uneducated. Stop people, go to ASU and stop students who are currently actively, supposedly learning at an institution of knowledge, supposedly, allegedly. Oh, that's the term we use, right?
Okay.
Ask 20 of them to give you anything about the Constitution. If 2 of them can answer, if 10% of them can answer intelligently, I'd be surprised. Or simple civics.
Civics is a great question. I think the education system as a whole is a hot topic right now. A lot of people view public education as clear indoctrination. When I was in grade school, very different environment than what you're seeing today. I was learning about true American history, who our presidents were, who our founders were, civics, the constitutions, how it's different from the state constitutions. Kids now, Mark, what are they learning? Is education an issue you're going to tackle as well? Or are you going to go in there and bust ass to make sure we secure the hell out of this border?
Well, look, I was told that we would get rid of the Department of Education, which I think absolutely should happen tomorrow. Why? Let's do it.
Okay.
Like, what's going on? We got to get rid of it. I don't think the federal government has any place in education in our country. I think that the states may have some level of getting our schools set up and doing all of that. But what is the federal government? It was way outside their role. It's not in the Constitution. Get rid of it. And then let's let the states start to do a better job of it. I mean, like, I think the federal government screws most of this up. You know, they lure you in with federal grants and money, and then that's how they make their way into the states, you know. And then the states become very reliant on them. It's like, I kind of use this example for the SNAP stuff, but I'll use it for this too. You know, you go to a national forest, you go to Yellowstone, and there are signs everywhere that say, "Don't feed the bears." If you feed the bears, they become reliant on it, and then they won't survive in the wild. Well, we're feeding the bears, you know, and then they can't go out and fend for themselves. I absolutely think college has become indoctrination. I think most Americans would agree with me. I don't want you to give any federal dollars to these schools. They're not doing a good job at it. And I don't think that the guy who's a blue-collar guy who busted his butt, who worked hard, who never had the opportunity to go to college or didn't want to, that he has to pay for somebody else to go to college only to be indoctrinated into hating America. I'm not okay with that. Like, I think they've become people need to become educated into more than just what's going on. Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, communism, how they've come about, and what the play has been on America for many years. They've been very open about it. They would infiltrate the education institutions in this country. They started with our universities, and they've managed to trickle down to our grade schools now, to where now we have to have litter boxes in the corner of the classroom because somebody feels like they're a dog or a cat. Stop with the insanity.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of it. I'm running for Congress and I'm sick and tired of the insanity.
I don't want to go off on a tangent on the litter
I know,
boxes.
I know.
but,
Like, I've been all over the place.
No, that's a totally insane deal. Let's talk about fundraising for a minute. You're running for Congress. Are you self-funding your campaign or are you raising money?
No, I don't. I'm not a self-funder. I'm not a wealthy person.
Okay.
We're raising money. Please, marklam.us. Come and donate today. I'm trying to do it the way that the Founding Fathers intended. I don't love the idea. You know, the first question they'll ask you when you go to D.C. is, how much money can you raise?
Yeah. Money controls everything.
Money controls everything. And I've always thought it's ridiculous that you have to raise millions of dollars to get a job that pays $174,000 a year. Or millions of dollars to get a job that pays $80,000 or $24,000 in the case of our state legislators. I think that's flawed. That is a problem in this country. We've got to get away from that.
But I don't think we ever will, though. Money.
You've got to do some campaign
factor.
They've got to do some campaign refinance laws, but they'll never do it.
No,
because the fox is guarding that dadgum hen house.
Yeah,
and as long as the foxes are in the hen house,
so how do you get rid of them? Because right now, funding freedom is expensive. People are spending millions.
You let a sheepdog in there. You know, you let a sheepdog like me in there and scare off the wolves, hopefully.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I don't know what one person can do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope to find out, and I'm going to do the best I can. I think that when I've talked to people, I think I'll use this as an analogy. I think we would all agree that Washington has become a snake pit, a viper's pit. Even if you've been in politics, you know you can't trust anybody.
No.
You put that snake in the backpack, it'll bite you. And then when you pull it out, it says, you knew what I was when you picked me up.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know if you know how they make anti-venom. So the way they make anti-venom is they'll take a snake's venom and they actually inject it into lambs or sheep, because lambs and sheep are very hardy animals. And while they may get a little sick, in the end, they are able to process the venom. And then they take that blood back out and they create anti-venoms. And I've always kind of jokingly, not jokingly, but, you know, flippantly.
Somewhat serious. It's okay to admit
say that we need to inject a little lamb's blood into Washington, D.C. You need a little anti-venom into what's going on in the Washington, D.C. And, you know, look, all I can do is say that the people of Arizona, in particular, CD5, which is going to be Apache Junction, East Mesa, Queen Creek, Gilbert, Santan Valley, South Chandler, that they'll have a representative who's actually looking out for them. And I understand it's probably going to be a little prickly for me, and it might be a little uncomfortable.
Why?
My family gets it. Well, look, I mean, the system's broken. The system's broken. I mean, we can't even, our budget hasn't been balanced for decades or years. I don't know. We're $37 trillion in debt. That alone tells you we're broken beyond, you know, really broken. You've got just these crazy social ideas that have permeated throughout society. Going back to what we talked about, you have Americans who have no concept of how great this country is. And the very thing that only this country provides them is the freedom of speech, is the same thing they use to bash it and attack it. And only in America do our schools and our institutions teach how bad our country is. You wouldn't find that in any other country.
No.
These countries are horrible third world countries. Tell them how proud they should be of their country. We live in the greatest country. And our school systems and our educators tell people how awful this country is. And then we wonder why we're so divided in this country. It's a miracle we're still 50-50.
Yeah.
But I like to believe that the majority of the Americans are truly common sense. And if they will wake up and start to vote in not just the federal elections, but even more importantly in our state elections, and making sure that we have common sense people who espouse the values that this country was built on, and not the insanity that the left continues to push on us, and the division that they try to divide us on race, religion, politics, all these things. Until that point, we're going to struggle.
It's time for a correction.
We need a course correction. You can course, you can change the course of the boat, or you can hit the shore. You can hit the sandbar. That's less painful. You can hit the iceberg. You can hit the coral, and that might sink your boat. Or we can shift the direction now. But you need people that are not afraid to take the wheel. You know, Publius Syrus says that anybody can hold the helm when the seas are calm. We need people that can hold the helm when the seas are rough. Yeah, I think that's one of the values that a sheriff brings. People say, well, how does sheriff prepare you for, not only have I been down at the state legislature, I've been very active even on a national level at Congress, working on different projects. I have, on a local level, on a county level, I've been involved in different things. I've managed a large budget, $60+ million, 600 employees. That's far more than I'll have as a congressman. My office will be a smidge of what it used to be. Yeah. And I don't have to respond to split-second decision calls anymore. Like, I have time to actually evaluate things. It's going to be a lot easier in many ways. But you know, I've always said, if your house is on fire or if there was thieves in your house, are you going to call a politician?
No, you're going to shoot them.
No, you're going to call your sheriff.
Or you're going to call your sheriff.
Or you shoot him. Yeah. That too. That's good. I've never heard that one before, but that's good. You're going to call your sheriff. Why? Because we're trained and experienced in restoring balance and order to chaos. And we have chaos. And you need tempered warriors who are aggressive enough to act, fierce enough to act, who are disciplined enough to know when, and who are wise enough to know the difference. And I think now more than ever, you need tempered warriors. And I think that's part of the reason why you see more military guys, more law enforcement. We know a fight when we see one. And we know what it takes. We need tempered warriors in the arena, not guys who fly off half-cocked and tell the military not to follow the commander-in-chief's orders, or other people who threaten the military if they hold them accountable for saying something so stupid. I think we need people that are solidly grounded in the values that this country was built on. We need people that are solidly grounded in the Constitution. I think we need people that have proven time and time again that they're not afraid to respond to those tough calls and make tough decisions, which I have done for my career. But we also need people that are so deeply patriotic that they are willing to sacrifice everything for this country. You know, in the Declaration of Independence, when they wrote it and they were getting ready to send it off to England, the very last line is often overlooked. And they said, it is with divine providence that we mutually agree with each other. We mutually agree with each other that we will sacrifice our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. What happened to that? What happened to those men who were willing to sacrifice that agreement where we will sacrifice? And I tell my constituents, I will sacrifice my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor for what is right for this country. And I'll do it under divine providence. And I think that we've gotten away from, people are afraid to talk like that. They're afraid to say, you know, because they think they might lose votes. Mm-hmm. I'm here to do what's right. If they want to vote me in, they'll vote me in. If they don't, they don't. I learned that. I already went through one of those. I didn't win. So,
well, let's end on that note. Mark, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me ramble on so many topics.
Love it. For those listening in today, where can they find you online?
Well, if you want to help my campaign, it's marklamb.us. If you'd like to see body cam videos, go to @RealAmericanSheriff on YouTube. That's separate. You know, I like to eat too still. So
there you go.
I like to have fun. I like to talk about the profession. I'm unapologetic about God, family, freedom, and my profession of law enforcement. I think it's important to this country. But yeah, marklamb.us. I'd love the support. If you live in District 5, any one of those cities I mentioned, you can sign my petition if you're a Republican. And if you want to donate, I would love to have that. Any contributions, all of it helps. I'm trying to do this the right way, the way that getting the money from the constituents, not from the lobbyists or the big money people or any of that. I'm trying to do it the right way, and so I would love your support.
Well, thank you, Mark. We appreciate you joining us today on The American Conversation.
Thank you for having me.